friends, welcome to this episode of Yarnyheart Fiber Art. My name is Jess. You can find me on Instagram at yarnyheart, but it's been a little quiet over there lately. This is the show where I talk about all the yarny things that I've been up to. I guess addressing the elephant in the room, or the bunny. Yeah, so it's been a while. Yeah, I don't think I've posted a Yarnyheart episode since November. So my apologies about that. To be honest, even though I have been knitting a lot, I have found it very difficult to kind of have the energy to sit down and like make one of these videos and then kind of go through the process of editing it and etc. etc. It's just been, kind of difficult. Like, I definitely feel like my creative energy has been pretty low lately, but knitting has definitely been a comfort. And I feel like I'm not the only person that feels this way right now, particularly people who are living in the US. It's just been a lot of stuff happening, and it's kind of hard to like find the same kind of joy in my hobbies that I used to. I suppose knitting itself, like the act of knitting being the exception, because I've been doing a lot of knitting during kind of my video hiatus. But I'm just gonna be honest, like it's been kind of hard to get a video out. So I am really glad though that I was able to find some time and like energy to sit down and catch up with you all, because I have so many things to share. So I believe what I'm sharing today, I've got 2 finished objects. I've got a bunch of new cast-ons, a lot of things that you guys haven't seen before. So I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of just like get right into it, So if that sounds like something that you are interested in, go ahead, get cozy, get your knitting or whatever crafty thing that you're working on, and let's dive in. So I guess I should start with what I'm wearing. I don't think this has ever been shown on the podcast, like in any stage of completion. I know that I talked a lot about starting this project, but I think I cast it on and completed it like 100% during my YouTube hiatus. So, but this pattern is Sasky by the Petite Knitter. I'm gonna try to remember how to do a knitting podcast. So we'll see how well that goes. Yes, this is Sasky. This is completed. I actually only finished this though. I only finished this maybe like a week ago or so. And I haven't actually worn it out yet, so there are no pictures on Instagram or anything. Yeah, I really loved this pattern. So I previously had made the Seek pattern by the Petite Knitter for my boyfriend, which is a very similar kind of pattern, top down fingering weight colorwork sweater, with this like kind of color work motif on the yoke that features an animal. The Seek that I did previously was a squirrel. This one is a bunny, which is accompanied by these little like clouds and moons. So I knitted this with the brown main color is Knit Picks Capretta in the colorway Pinecone Heather, and I used I think 6 balls of this. I really don't have a whole lot left of this, so this is all that I have left of the Capretta, and I purchased 6 balls of this, so this used pretty much all of it. And if anything, I could have gotten away with knitting the body a little bit longer than I did. I typically like a cropped fit, and I followed the instructions on the pattern for a cropped fit, but I am just a little bit nervous about the hemline. Like, this is not a sweater that I was really intending to wear to work at all anyway, but I think with the way it is now and how cropped it is, I do feel like particularly uncomfortable about wearing this to work unless I have like a really high-waisted pant underneath it. Yeah, but I really like the way it turned out. So the contrast color here, you can tell that it's not one solid color. It starts off lighter and it kind of fades to more of this like darker orange. This is a fade kit by Knitted Wit. I believe the color is called Yellow Brick Road, but it was like 6 like mini skeins of fingering weight. I don't think it was superwash. I think it was just fingering weight merino wool that was kind of dyed in this nice fade from like this kind of more sunny yellow down to like a darker orange. And this, I believe this is the, I think it is, yeah. I think this is the darkest color in the fade kit. It's kind of like this darker orangey gold color. And as you can see, I didn't touch the last skein, and I had quite a bit of the second to last skein left as well. Yeah, originally the fade kit was meant for a cowl, and it came with a cowl pattern, but I'm not really a cowl person, so I figured it would be a good amount of yarn to use as the yoke of a colorwork sweater, and I was correct. I think it turned out really good. And I think especially combined with the brown, you know, it's nice and warm, it's nice and like autumny, which is definitely within like my color palette. So I think it worked out pretty well. I did modify the sleeves. The original sleeves are supposed to be tapered with like a what's it called? Like a steady rate decrease on the sleeves, but I really like having a straight sleeve. Or even a balloon sleeve. Like the previous colorwork sweater that I knitted for myself was the Between Petals Pullover by Teti Lutsak. And that design actually had a balloon sleeve where there were a few increases on the sleeve, and then it kind of cinches down into like a tighter cuff. I liked that silhouette, but I didn't necessarily feel like I had to like increase. Like I feel like I didn't need like the drama of the balloon sleeve necessarily, but I do tend to like having more room in my sleeves in general, and I figured I had enough yarn to do it as a straight sleeve, so I did. So I just kept knitting it straight. Basically I used one whole ball per sleeve because I didn't want to count rows, and I figured that one ball would pretty much give me a sleeve length. So basically all I did is I attached one new ball of capretta at the armhole, and then I just knitted straight in the round until I ran out of yarn, and then I attached like my last bit that I showed earlier once I ran out of yarn, and then I just did one row of rapid decreases and then a 1 by 1 rib for the cuff. And then as per the pattern, I did the bind off row with the contrast color again. And you can also see the contrast color is the same on the bottom hem of the sweater here. So yeah, I think it's cute, not much more to say. Actually, okay, so this is my first time working with cashmere for myself in general. Because they were having a sale on capretta, and I was like, ooh, I could knit like myself a cashmere sweater and it'd be really nice. So so I enjoyed working with it. It's obviously very soft, and like wearing it is super comfortable. Like it feels like air. Or like, I mean, it is warming. I have a fan on right now because it is getting kind of warm here in the Bay Area this week. So it is pretty warming, but it's very lightweight and it's very soft. I think the only concern that I might have is because it's so soft, I'm a little concerned about pilling in the long run. But I also just bought a fabric shaver, and I used it on some of my older sweaters that have started pilling and being less fun to wear because they're pilling. And so having tried it on those, like it works really great. So now I'm less concerned about this pilling because I know that if it does pill, I now have a little like doohickey now that I can just use and like get rid of those pills really quickly. So yeah, but this is my Sasky sweater. I know I've been hyping this one up a lot and then just did not cover it whatsoever in my podcast. But I really had a lot of fun knitting this one. I feel like it was pretty straightforward. Like, I feel like once you've done one top-down circular yoke colorwork sweater, like you can pretty much do any top-down circular yoke colorwork sweater and it's not that difficult. Like once you've done it once, you kind of understand the construction of it. That's definitely how I felt with this one, but I still feel like I'm like addicted to color work though. Like I feel like no matter how many times I knit like this exact same formula of a sweater, I'll never get sick of it, just because like it's so fun and like addicting to like watch the pattern appear like row by row. So I don't think I'll ever get tired of knitting color work, honestly. But looking to like my immediate future, or like even the yarn that I have on hand, I really don't see any more colorwork sweaters in my future for right now. Like all of the things that I have in progress and all of the things that I have future plans for at the moment are not colorwork sweaters. And that's partially due to spring being on its way. You know, colorwork kind of very much lends itself more towards like fall and winter knitting. But I don't plan on stopping knitting colorwork sweaters like anytime soon. So if anything, I'm actually looking forward to when things get cold again and I kind of feel that itch to like cast on something colorwork again. So we'll kind of see where that takes me. It's not the only colorwork project though. Like, I mean, I do have colorwork projects that are occupying some of my knitting space right now, but nothing so big as like a sweater project, which if you've been following the podcast, you probably have figured out by now that I am primarily like a garment knitter. Like I really enjoy knitting garments like sweaters or tops or cardigans and stuff, and I'm not so much of an accessories knitter really. And I think I reached a point in my life where I just need to kind of embrace that and stop trying to force myself to knit accessories, partially because I don't really wear accessories a whole lot. Like I'm sure there are some that I would get use out of. I keep talking about knitting myself a pair of mitts for the winter, just because it gets cold when I drive in the mornings. But aside from that, like I don't really wear accessories as part of like my day-to-day outfits, so I kind of don't really see a point in knitting them unless I'm knitting them for someone else, which is, you know, an entirely different story. So yeah, long-winded long-winded first project, but I feel like there is like so much to talk about. I feel like there is so much to talk about with this sweater, and yet somehow I like still have not talked about all of it. I guess the only other thing is like there is some short row shaping on this, kind of like at the underarm, but it's not significant enough that I can really tell like which is the front and which is the back. So I had to like sew, not even sew, like I just like put a little like thread on the back of here and just like kind of tied it on the inside so that I know which is the front and which is the back, but it shouldn't be, you know, like noticeable to like literally anybody except me. Yeah, so that's the only other thing, is like that was kind of hard to tell, but I know that's certainly not something that's unique to this sweater pattern. That's pretty common, but that is something that I ran into with this. Yep. So that's my Sasky. So my second finished object is one that you've seen before, although admittedly, because even before I kind of took a break from YouTube, like I was posting more and more sporadically, I feel, even leading up to that. So you've seen it, but I feel like it's, I don't think I covered it that much. I think when I showed it to you, I was almost done with it anyway. And then now it's just kind of like finished up. I think I had like one sleeve to go when you saw this last or something like that. But this is my Foxberry sweater by Sari Nordland. I don't know how this is gonna work. This kind of works. This kind of works. So this is my Foxberry sweater by Sari Nordland. And like I had said, you all saw this in progress once, and then I just kind of finished up the sleeve. But I've this has been finished for a long time now. Like I wore it to like all of my Christmas events and things like that. So I guess in a way this was my Christmas sweater. I think I finished it though like right before Thanksgiving. Um, oh, and I think I actually wore it in my previous knitting video, which was not a knitting podcast, but was like or no, not spring. It's not spring yet. My winter pattern roundup. I think this was in my winter pattern roundup. I think I was wearing this sweater. Yeah. So it's been done for a hot minute. But I've very much been enjoying wearing it. Like now it's a little too hot to be wearing mohair, but I have definitely, I think since finishing this was definitely like my most worn sweater this winter. Yeah, I loved it. It was really fun. So when I mentioned this previously, I did talk a bit about the initial construction of it. So this is top down in the round, circular yoke, but the yoke is kind of like this lace and bauble motif. And I had casted this on right before leaving for Korea, like I think literally the night before, just so that I didn't have to bring 2 sets of needles. And then yeah, so I did everything that needed the smaller needles, like for the collar, and I folded it over and everything. And I started knitting the yoke on the plane to Korea, and this is pretty much my Korea project in October. And I believe I just went a little bit past the yoke by the time I landed back in the US. And then after that, it was just kind of like all stockinette, so it kind of went by pretty fast. Yeah, but this is, it's so nice. I do really love this sweater. I believe I said this was mohair before. I misspoke. This is Suri alpaca. The yarns I used for this, this was Earth Yarns Harvest Fingering in the color Grape Leaf, which is a fingering weight superwash merino. Is it superwash? I think it's superwash. I'm pretty sure it's superwash merino, but it's 100% merino. I do know that. And then this is held together with a lace weight Suri alpaca by Anzula Luxury Fibers in the color, I think the color is Olivia. I'll correct myself if that's not true, but I think the colorway is Olivia. But that yarn is kind of like a lighter, more like pistachio-ish color. And then the Harvest Fingering in Grape Leaf, the Grape Leaf color was kind of like this darker green color. I didn't buy them at the same time. I bought them both during the Bay Area yarn crawl last year. And I bought the Suri alpaca first, and I didn't have that skein physically with me when I bought the merino. But I just kind of like trusted the process. I don't know, like, I don't know what gave me the audacity to do that. So it's certainly not a perfect match, and I was a little bit nervous about it before I swatched, but I did swatch, and I really loved the swatch because it kind of ended up making this beautifully marled, like kind of mossy green color, which just turned out really, really gorgeous. And so this is kind of how it turned out, and I think also with the fuzziness, like, it really adds to that like mossy quality. So yeah, I love this sweater. Oh, I get the other thing of note is that the lace and baubles motif does come back at the end of the cuff there. Yep, super fun. I think my only regret with this sweater is that I did one of the cuff bind offs tighter than the other cuff bind off, and I don't know if I can't remember if it was because I was playing Yarn Chicken or like, but either way, one of the sides is like tighter than the other. So, oh, I was playing Yarn Chicken, that's right. So I was right down to the wire here, not with the Suri alpaca, but with the fingering weight merino. It was pretty down to the wire there, and I really didn't want to mess around with like dye lots or anything like that. So actually the cuff motif is supposed to repeat one more time, but I cut out one of the repeats and just kind of bound off as is. And I think in my in my paranoia, one of them is a little too tight, but it's not the end of the world. Like it, you know, I can still get it on. It's just I can't really like pull it up very much like I can with this sweater. But the length ended up fine. Like honestly, I'm kind of glad that I cut off one of the pattern repeats, because I think if I had left it in, it might have been a little bit too long for me. Like I don't have particularly long arms. Like even this sweater like is a little long on me. So I'm kind of glad that I did that in the end. It kind of worked out in my favor, weirdly. So yeah. So those are my 2 finished objects. I do have like a half finished object. So I guess I'll share that next. I feel like whenever a knitting podcaster mentions like a half finished object, like it's universally understood to be like a sock. Or like maybe like one glove of a pair or something like that. But yeah, so I have a finished sock to share. I honestly do not remember what stage of completion this sock was when I shared it last. But it's done. So this is the sock that I cast it on for before going to Korea, and then brought with me thinking that I would have time to knit on like the subways or in taxis and stuff like that. But I get really motion sick and I felt rude knitting in the taxi, also because I was with my mom all the time, so we were just talking a lot. And then I only took the subway a couple of times, so I didn't really have a whole lot of subway knitting time. So I honestly, like, I casted it on for Korea, but I did not touch it since then. But since it was occupying my sock needles, I just wanted to finish this one sock instead of like kind of jumping back and forth between the socks that I'm working on. So I finished one sock and then I gave my sock needles back to my previous sock that I was working on. So I'll finish that sock, and then I haven't decided yet if I want to immediately knit the second sock of that pair or if I want to knit this sock's pair. I haven't decided yet, and I think I'll just do whatever strikes me at the moment. But this is one half of the Fairy Maiden socks by This Handmade Life. And yeah, so this is a free pattern, which is really, like, it's a really good pattern for a free pattern. I also haven't blocked these, so they're like kind of scrunched up, but even without blocking, like, I think it still looks pretty nice in my opinion. But the yarn that I used for this was Koigu hand-painted yarns, and it's the yarn that's called KPPPM, which last time I did share these because I didn't know what the acronym stood for, but then I had to look it up for when I was editing it, and it stands for Koigu Painter's Palette Premium Merino. Yeah. So this is KPPPM Koigu Painter's Palette Premium Merino yarn. Yeah. I got this during the yarn crawl as well. This was from Imagine It in San Francisco, which is a really cool store, by the way. Like, I don't know if I have the energy to go to San Francisco yarn stores again during this year's yarn crawl, which is happening next month. Because like the San Francisco day was like kind of intense, both for me and my boyfriend, of like trying to hit all these yarn stores in San Francisco. I loved the stores that were there, but it's like, it's a lot of effort. Parking in San Francisco is not fun or easy. The stores are not necessarily close to each other. It is hard to drive around in San Francisco. I suppose I could take Bart in there. I wouldn't really want to go alone though. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. I would love to go to those stores again, but I don't know. It's kind of it's a lot to get out there. And I also feel like the yarn stores that are here in the East Bay, or like on this side of the Bay Area, are easier to get to and are certainly like plentiful enough for me to spend my yarn crawl budget just on this side of the Bay. Because like I have Busy Sticks, which is my local yarn store. Busy Work in Martinez is pretty close as well. There's 2 yarn stores in Livermore. And then there's a smattering of yarn stores in San Jose South Bay area, which is an area that I frequent as well. So I feel like between all of that, I can chew through my yarn crawl budget. I don't really need to make the trek across the bay. So yeah. I forgot Black Squirrel. Black Squirrel in Berkeley is also one that I would like to go to that would probably be easier. But this is my one finished sock. It's cute. The color had always reminded me of like dried roses or maybe like a pistachio rose cake. And so I'm kind of glad that I kind of used it on this pattern, which is kind of like whimsical, like cottagecore-y. This will probably look better when it's blocked because it kind of scrunches up, but you can see the lace motif there is kind of like, it kind of mimics cables in a way, but it also kind of mimics a rib in a way, but it's really pretty. And this sock also fits my foot like really well. I think I'd complained before about how I tried a shadow wrap heel and it didn't really fit my foot very well. And so this one is just like a regular like heel flap and gusset heel. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's something to do with the ribbing on top, which kind of like cinches the top a little bit more, but these socks like fit my foot really well. So, and I love that it's a free pattern as well. And so I think I'm just going to keep this pattern in my back pocket. I might like, I'm not usually one to revisit patterns, but this is a pattern that I would consider revisiting just because I really liked how the sock knit up. It's a very easy, simple sock like to execute, but it looks really pretty as like a finished product. Yeah. I wasn't sure originally if I was going to talk about this or not, but I think I'm just going to. Yeah, I think I'm just going to talk about it anyway, because I do have significant progress that I've made on this one. So I shared this on the podcast a while ago, and I've just been kind of giving sporadic updates on this. I actually casted this on a year ago. I casted this on just over a year ago because I casted it on February 6th of last year. Kind of to commemorate my 할아버지, which means grandpa in Korean, because that was the anniversary of his passing. And this pattern is called the 할아버지 cardigan, and so it was kind of special for me. So I casted it on that day, and I didn't give myself any kind of deadline whatsoever. Like for me, this was just a project to kind of like pull out whenever I felt like it and kind of work on, and then like kind of take it very slow on this. I'm usually a very like results oriented knitter. Like I like having things be done. I like having them like off my plate. I don't usually like to carry a whole lot of whips at a time. It just kind of makes me anxious. But for this one, I had told myself, you know, it's like, allow yourself to carry this one, like allow yourself to spend time with this one, and like be kind of a sloth knitter when it like for this project in particular, and like don't be anxious about finishing it, like don't be anxious about like getting it done or like clearing it out or anything like that, and just kind of like take your time with this one and let it take space. But I have made quite significant progress. So this is meant to be the left sleeve, so I guess I'm holding it wrong, like this this way. So this is the left sleeve of the cardigan. This is a pattern by Egyo Knit. I mentioned it's called the 할아버지 cardigan by Egyo Knit. And it's a very interesting construction. It's actually knitted from like left to right. So you cast on at the cuff of the left sleeve, and then you knit up the sleeve, and then I'm now working flat for the body, kind of increasing for the body. I'm gonna be honest, when I first started this pattern, I could not conceive of like how this cardigan like becomes a cardigan. I was like, what do you mean you start at the sleeve and then like what happens when it's flat like for a cardigan? I kind of understand now. So basically I'm knitting flat right now and kind of increasing for the body. So I guess holding this up on myself, it would be kind of like to here. It's a very oversized cardigan as well. So it would probably be like there with like this much positive ease in the body. And I'm just kind of knitting flat, and what will happen eventually is like it will grow to a point that I'm knitting like this across the body, and then this will be flat, and all you have to do is stitch up the sides at the end. Like, I don't know why it didn't occur to me when I was like first reading the pattern that like, oh, you just stitch up the sides. It's not really like seaming pieces together, but you just turn the flat into a seam. Anyway, it's been going great. I know a lot of people had trouble doing the doing the checker cable on the reverse side, because you do have to cable every row, which means that when you go flat, you're cabling on the reverse side, and it's a faux cable, so you know you should theoretically be able to easily do it without a cable needle. It took me a while to figure out how to do it, and I was using a cable needle at first to kind of teach myself how to do it, or like what it looks like on the reverse side. And then after a couple of rows of using a cable needle, I was eventually able to understand like how to do it without a cable needle, but like purling the cables. So I eventually got it, but it did take me a little bit. And I know that's a complaint that a lot of people had, was just that it was like difficult to cable on the reverse side. But if you're thinking of making this pattern, I think, you know, use the cable needle first as kind of like training wheels, and that will make learning it a lot easier when you take the training wheels off. Yeah, beautiful pattern. The yarn that I'm using is Bergère de France. What was this one called? I think it's called Du Soleil, in the color, what color is it? Is it hazel? I don't remember what color this is. I don't have a label either. This is crazy. This never happens to me. Ever. Surely not. I think that's right though. I think it's Du Soleil in the color hazel. But this is 80% wool, 20% polyamide. And it was like on super sale on the Bergère de France website when I purchased it, so I couldn't say no, and I was able to get a really hefty sweater quantity for this, because this project kind of eats a lot of yarn, because I have like 20 of these balls, and supposedly this pattern is supposed to use all of them. So yeah, this one is kind of a yarn muncher. But yeah, that's current progress on my Harabaji cardigan. So my next whip, I don't think I've even mentioned the pattern for this at all. But I did mention a long time ago that I was really wanting to knit myself like a very oversized kind of like slouchy sweater. In my size range, it's kind of hard to find commercial sweaters that are like actually oversized. Okay, when I say oversized, like yes, positive ease, you know, like it's not that hard to find an oversized sweater, but I'm talking about like Pinterest oversized. Do you know what I mean? Where there's just like some girl in this sweater that is completely like consuming her. Like that's the kind of oversized fit that I really wanted in a sweater. And so I decided to knit my own. And so when I was in Korea, I was at this store in Hongdae called Somsomnit. Well, I guess it wasn't really in Hongdae. It was in Mapogu, which is the district that Hongdae is in. But I think it was a little far off to be really considered Hongdae. But this store is called Somsomnit. I've been following them on Instagram for a while, and I want to go back to this store so badly. Like, I think in my yarn shopping in Korea video, I said something along the lines of, oh, none of these are like must-sees. This is just like my opinions on each. Like, I kind of take that back, because I want to go back to this store so badly. It's like I literally researched like, okay, how much would shipping be like to get this yarn shipped to me if I want more, because I want more of their yarn really desperately. The answer was probably not worth the shipping cost, but regardless, I was able to purchase a very large quantity of yarn from their store for relatively very cheap, just because of like the US Korea exchange rate is like very much in the US favor, or was at least when I went, because who knows what's gonna happen. I bought a large quantity of this yarn, which is called New Bottom, and this color is called Rust, and it is kind of like a rusty, like brown orange kind of color, which is like very suited to my personal color palette. So these cones come in 200 grams each, and it's about equivalent to like a DK weight. So I bought 3. Okay, so these cones come in 200 grams, and 100 grams is 250 meters. I bought 3 of these 200 gram cones So, I mean, I had done all the math already. And, you know, I got that for basically a steal in terms of like what a comparable yarn would be in the US. This yarn is 90% Tasmania wool and 10% cashmere. So it really has like this beautiful like softness and squishiness to it from the cashmere. It's really amazing to work with. But all that to say, I bought all of that yarn with the intention of making my like big oversized Pinterest girly sweater. But I didn't have a pattern in mind. I was even thinking of self-drafting a pattern. And then I came across the Alvar pullover by Sari Nordland, and it pretty much checked all my boxes, honestly. Like, it had that drop shoulder, it had a texture that wasn't a cable. It could be knit longer than on the model, which is kind of what I intended to do. I picked a size that gave me more positive ease than what was recommended, even though what was recommended was already a generous amount of positive ease. I picked one size bigger than that. And then the only thing really that I didn't quite like about that pattern as is was the arm seemed to be a little bit tight, which is something that I have noticed seems to be a trend in Sari Nordland patterns. Like, even the Foxberry sweater, like, wasn't tight necessarily, but it was like, you know, not as loose as I would like. So I decided to just make the modification to widen the armholes and cast and like pick up more stitches to make a bigger sleeve. But here is my Alvar pullover so far. Oh, that's coming out really nice on the camera. Oh, I love how that looks on camera. So yeah, so this is my Alvar pullover so far. As you can see, I've already split first sleeves, and I'm part of the way down the body. And I'm on my second cone of yarn. They come pretty thickums. I'm probably halfway through this second cone, I would say. But I should, by my calculations, I should have plenty of yarn to finish this sweater exactly to like the length and exactly the way that I would want it to. But it's going really well. I love this pattern. I love the way it looks. So like you can see, there's 3 different kind of like textured motifs. These motifs are just made with knits and purls. And I love that it's very like subtle looking, but it's also like most definitely textured. You can see that I have like this scoop neck here, and then, you know, you go back and pick up stitches for a ribbed collar. I just really love it. Like, every time I try this on, I just kind of like stand there in the mirror for a little bit, just like admiring how it fits on me and how perfect it is. And as you can see, it has a very generous amount of positive ease for me. Yeah, I'm just very, very happy. So the way that you knit this, it's knit contiguously. You cast on at the back yoke, you kind of increase at the sides to make like shoulder shaping. And then once you do that, you put stitches on. You knit down for a while, you put stitches on hold. And then you pick up at each shoulder, and then you knit, and then you knit, and then you connect for the front neckline. And then you knit down until you're ready to join it in the round. Then you join in the round, you just continue down. So pretty easy, pretty standard contiguous knitting flow. But it's great. And honestly, I've gotten at the point where I've gone probably like 10 rows without even looking at the pattern at this point. Just because, you know, I think the hardest motif to remember is this, where is it? Is, let me find it. The hardest motif to remember probably is this one with the diamonds. Like, for some reason, I just can't wrap my head around this one. But the checker one and the diagonal stripes one, like, I can do that without even looking at the pattern, honestly. So, yeah. But it's great. It's really easy. And one thing with these motifs, too, is, like, because they're repeating, it's not that hard to, like, fix it if you do mess up. Not that I've messed up a couple of times where like I started the row or started the round on like the wrong particularly for the stripes and the checkers, like it's a pattern of like knit 3 purl 3 knit 3 purl 3, but on occasion I have started off on like a purl 3 when I was supposed to start off on like a knit 3 or like vice versa. But it's pretty easy to correct because it's repeating, you know? So it's like, even though I did start on the wrong one for one of these, like you can't tell where it is because it, you know, it's repeating. So it's really nice, but I'm super happy with this one. Was that everything I had to say? I was talking about the yarn. I told you about the yarn, told you about the pattern, told you about my progress. I think that's it. I'm really liking this one. This is kind of becoming my like TV knitting now that I've kind of gotten the motif more or less down. Yeah, and I'm just kind of chugging along. I'm really hoping to finish this one though before the weather gets permanently warm. Like right now, I did mention that it's getting warm, but I feel like it's kind of more of a hot flash than like true spring. Like all of the trees have decided that it's spring and they're like blooming and stuff like that, but it's fool's spring. It's still February. So like it's not real spring. There's no way. So we'll just have to see. Like I know it's going to get cold again before actual spring comes, so I'm really hoping that I can finish this sweater in time for me to wear during like the last cold snaps of the season, you know? Okay, so this next one is one that I have only been working on for like about a week at this point, but I have quite a lot of progress to share actually. So this was also a yarn that I bought at Som Knit in Korea. This one is called Pubir, and the color is called Dark Wine. So this one is the equivalent of like a fingering weight. I think it might be slightly thicker than a fingering weight, having worked with it now. But regardless, I'm kind of still classifying it as like a fingering weight for the most part. But I actually bought this with the intention of knitting a sweater for my mom. She's kind of like a winter palette, whereas I'm more of like a fall palette. Like this doesn't really do much for me. But this is a really great color on her. And so she picked out this color for herself. And this yarn is 70% Tasmania wool, 30% baby alpaca. So it's very drapey, very soft, very warm kind of fabric. And then these also come in 200-gram cones. But with this yarn, 100 grams is equal to 400 meters. So that gives me like 1,600 meters, give or take, of yarn, I think. And so her birthday is in April, and so I was kind of telling her, hey, you know, like I bought this yarn for you in Korea. So I'd really like, and I have enough time in advance now, and I'd really like to knit you a sweater for your birthday. So, you know, I showed her some pattern, like I did some pre-research of fingering weight sweater patterns. She's not really into color work. She's kind of more into like the lace and cables kinds of motifs, and so I was looking for patterns that kind of like fit within her scope of like sweaters that she would like to wear. I kind of gave her some like options, and the one that she picked is called, I have to look up what it's called. I believe it's called Ryan, which is funny because that's my brother's name. But it's not spelled the way this is spelled. Yes, so this pattern is called Ryan by Marie Wallen. It is a little bit of an older pattern, but it's really pretty. Honestly, I was a little bit scared at first when she picked this pattern. Like I don't usually get intimidated by knitting patterns at this point, but this particular one that she picked, I was like, I'm a little intimidated, but I'm also down to try something new, so I'll go for it. I think it's partially giving me PTSD of the like intricate sweater that I knitted in like the beginning of COVID. It was worsted weight, all over cables. It was from an Interweave Knits issue. I'll put a picture on the screen because I can't remember the name of the pattern, but I also knitted it in kind of like this dark wine color. The cables didn't show up super duper well, and also more than anything because I was still kind of a novice knitter when it came to sweaters, I knitted it I think a size too small, and so it had a lot of negative ease on, well, it was supposed to have negative ease, but I feel like it was choking me The yarn that I ordered was not very soft. It was like very rustic, very itchy, and it was seamed. It was knitted flat in pieces and seamed, and it was just like the perfect combination of like a sweater to give me trauma. And so I feel like I'm kind of getting like PTSD from that sweater when I looked at the pattern for this one, because it's very similar. It is knit flat in pieces and then seamed. It is all over cables. Well, this one has lace. I feel like this one has more lace than cables. And it's just kind of like this intricate sweater. I'm knitting it in this dark wine color. But I have many more years of sweater knitting under my belt now, so I'm definitely a smarter knitter than I was back then. So I'm sure it will be fine. But that being said, this is what I have so far. So it's already quite a bit for having only been working on this like a week. And when I say a week, like on and off for a week, I've been kind of alternating between this and my Alvar pullover. But yeah, so it's, you can see like it looks really see-through right now, but I think it's partially because it's one layer, and it's partially because like, you know, this hasn't been blocked or anything. Because I did swatch for this, and the swatch is supposed to be in like reverse stockinette, but the swatch, this is blocked. It really bloomed after blocking, like it kind of filled in a lot of these spaces after being blocked, and so I'm pretty confident that the sweater will be similar. Like a lot of these places in between the cables and stuff, like where it's kind of see-through, like I'm pretty confident that once we block it, it will kind of fill in a lot of those gaps and become less sheer. But these lace panels obviously will be a little bit sheer. But overall, I think it will get more structure after blocking. So yeah, so it's bottom up, knitted flat in pieces, and then seamed. I love my mother. Yeah, it's a really pretty pattern. It has these lace panels. It has like this kind of like, I know it's kind of more like a horseshoe cable, but to me it seems like a little more like a herringbone than that. And then it has these faux cable panels. So actually this panel is the only panel that's real cables, because the cables on here are actually faux cables. So it's pretty easy. Like I really only need to bust my cable needle. I think that was another fear that I had, was that I would have to like be cabling like every row, which is just not very fun, honestly. But it's all faux cables for the most part, and I really only have to bust out my cable needle like once every 4 rows just to do this repeating part. And that's it. So it's actually not as bad as I thought. Yeah. That being said, however, the pattern itself is not the clearest pattern that I have read. And I think that also is like, it's kind of reminiscent of like an interweave knits pattern where, you know, like it's in a publication. So like, yes, it's been tech edited, but it's also like not the best editing, I would say. Because like a pattern that's live on Ravelry will often get like addendums, or there's like the entire internet of people like troubleshooting it or like letting the designer know if something's wrong. But with a published pattern, like in a book, like once it's out there, and it's just not a living document. This pattern was part of a book, and so it kind of has that same feel of like, it doesn't feel fresh. I don't know if that's even the word that I'm looking for. It's not necessarily like peer reviewed. It's been reviewed, but it hasn't really been peer reviewed. There's only like 4 projects on Ravelry or something like that. But I'm making do, and I think if I was more of a novice knitter, I would have a really hard time with this pattern, just because I feel like there are things in the pattern that are implied but not explicitly said. And I think the only reason why I'm not having as much trouble with this pattern is because I've knitted enough sweaters at this point that I kind of know what I'm doing. Like when like we're bought. So that's another thing. I could just be a poor reader. but I don't remember seeing at any point that it was supposed to be bottom up. I was just reading the pattern and thinking to myself like, but you have to, oh, okay, so this is bottom up, you know, like that kind of a thing where, yeah, I mean, like it's all things that are, you know, I don't know, it's relative, I guess. I mean, I could be the only one having this problem, honestly, but all that to say, I think that it is certainly working to my advantage to have like this basic understanding of sweater construction, because when things go wrong, I'm able to adapt better and kind of like know what I need to get to in the end. You know, it's like I know what shape this needs to be at the end, and everything in between is kind of like up to my discretion. Like for instance, I realized like halfway through that I was reading the pattern, like the chart backwards. The chart is also so overwhelming. Like I remember opening up the pattern for the first time, like the PDF, and the chart is like taking up 2 pages and it's super tiny. So I needed to zoom in so far just to see like the chart symbols, and it's a pretty overwhelming looking chart. But I remember puzzling over like, because I was sitting there thinking in my head, usually you read a chart right to left, right? You know, like that's just usually how you read it. But then the numbers on the right were throwing me off because like I forget why it threw me off, but it was something to do with like the starting row, and what it said was like, so like it said row 1 in the written pattern, and then it was like start with row 1 of the chart, but then it said like, you know, right side, but then I'm looking at the chart and I'm like, but the letters, like the numbers on the right are even numbers, which are the wrong side numbers. So if those are the numbers on this side, shouldn't I be reading it from this side? And then I was thinking to myself, like, are charts universally read right to left? Or is that just pattern by pattern? Am I supposed to read this left to right because the numbers are on this side? Etc., etc., etc. All that to say, like, I ended up knitting the chart backwards because I was like, oh, you know, right side, oh, the numbers are on this side, and then I read it left to right because that seemed like what they wanted me to do, when it was in fact not what they wanted me to do. So all of these faux cables that are here that kind of go through the ribbing, I did them all backwards. And so when I realized that literally yesterday, because I was starting to get to more like past the ribbing part and into more of the involved pattern and things were lining up, I was like, oh, I did this backwards. And then I called my mom and I was just to vent. I was like, I'm knitting her sweater and I did everything backwards, and now I have to rip it all out. I was working on this for a week, and she was the one who asked me. She's like, I feel like you're smart enough to like, she's like, I don't care if it looks exactly like the picture on there, you know, all I care about is like if it looks nice. So I think you're smart enough to like figure out a way. And I was like, I am smart enough to figure out a way. So all I did was I reversed some of the cables in the main chart to keep knitting it backwards the way that I had knitted it, but it will still look fine in the end. So all that to say, yeah, so that's my second WIP, and that one has a deadline, April. I do have a couple of business trips that I'm taking in March, so I'm kind of excited to bring that with me, because my Oliver is getting too big right now to really take with me places unless I'm going to like my boyfriend's house or something. So this one being in pieces, even if I finish one piece, you know, then the next piece will also be small when I start out. So this was going to be more transportable for me. So I'm kind of excited to have this as like my business trip knit. Because I anticipate having a lot of time like alone in my hotel room and stuff like that. So I'm excited to take that with me and kind of like have that as a travel companion when I go places. Yeah. So that's my Ryan sweater. So my last new cast on is the one that I was talking about where I said I have some color work, but not any color work sweaters. I am working on some color work socks. You see, there's so many strings going on here, but that's a problem for later me. So these are a pair. I don't know what you would call these. I think they're called doodle socks. But this is a pattern by Jamie Lomax, otherwise known as Pacific Knit Doodle Co. And I'm making some doodle socks. So if you don't know, Pacific Knit Co. has a lot of these like doodle packs, which are small colorwork motifs that can be incorporated into any kind of like base knitting pattern. I think most recently she came out with a winter doodle sweater like around Christmas time for making like a Christmas sweater with a bunch of fun motifs. That looks like fun to tackle one day, but today's not that day. So my local store, Busy Sticks, she had a bunch of these card decks by Pacific Knit Doodle Co. And I had seen her stuff online and on Ravelry, but I didn't know that she made physical card decks, and I thought they were just like the coolest things ever. And so I went to Knit Night. I saw these. I came home from Knit Night, and like a whole week that I was at home, I could not stop thinking about them. I was like, I want one so bad. Because as you know, I'm like a colorwork fiend. And so then that next weekend, I went back to the store and I bought myself a card deck. So this one that I have is the Farm Doodle card deck. And I also bought the accompanying sock pattern to be able to use the doodles to make a sock, because the card decks do come with cowl patterns, but as mentioned previously, I'm not really a cowl person, but I do enjoy socks. Like, I was about to say I'm not really a sock knitter, but you've seen all the socks that I've been making. Like, I'm not primarily a sock knitter, but out of all knitted accessories, I would wear socks the most because I do wear socks every day, you know? And especially when I'm working at home, I really like having hand knitted socks. They're just warm, you know, and woolly. But it's just so cute. So it's a card deck that has all of these different motifs, and you just mix and match them to make your own pattern. I feel like I could have used any old vanilla sock pattern and it would have been fine with using the doodles with it. But I do feel like her specific sock pattern that incorporates the doodles, I do feel like it was worth buying, just because it does like give you guidance on how to use the doodles in a sock. One thing also is that the doodle sock pattern utilizes an afterthought heel, which I have never done before. But essentially, like, you put in, when you're ready for the heel, you put in like a line of waste yarn, and this is like, I think technically a short row of just waste yarn. So as you can see, I haven't gone back and done the heel yet, but I will let you know how that goes when I do. But this is the line for the afterthought heel. So as you can see, the motifs that I have apples, which I kind of regret my color choices for the apples. Like, I wish I'd used a darker brown or a black or something, but eh. Then I have corn stalks, then I have some soil for the corn stalks, and then I have potatoes, which grow under the ground, under the soil. And then there's the heel split, and on the heel right now I'm starting to knit some tractors. I think after the tractors I might do a fence, and then possibly a barn if I still have like more space before the toe. And then we'll see how it goes. But it's really fun. It's super complex. Way back in the day, like in the height of COVID, I actually bought all these colors to try and self-draft some Stardew Valley chicken socks. But there was too many colors going on. I wasn't managing my attention very well, and I ended up scrapping the whole project. But I'm really happy to be able to bust those colors out again to make a new colorwork project. And it's so fun though, because mixing and matching all these motifs, like, you have an endless supply of like sock projects and colorwork projects to do. So it's really fun. That's the other thing is, you know, like, this is the Farm Doodle pack, but if you buy any of the other packs, you can mix and match them because they're like modular patterns. Like, you can slot them in next to each other. They're all the same, you know, they're meant to be mixed and matched. So it's so fun. I'm having a lot of fun. Yeah, but like I was saying, I scrapped the chicken project just because the yarn management was too much. It was really tight. I couldn't get it on my foot. I wasn't managing my tension. but I think having a pattern to work off of and kind of like someone who's trailblazed it before, it's making it a lot easier. So like definitely this is still a very thick sock. It's going to be very warm when it's done. There's a lot of yarn going on, but it's still stretchy. Like I will definitely be able to like get this over my foot. So I think this has been a very fun experimental project. This one's just been fun. Like this was a complete impulse cast on. I went to the store, I bought the thing. I even bought another set of 9-inch circulars so I could cast it on right away. And I've just been kind of having a lot of fun with this one. Okay, my camera battery is dying, which is my cue to wrap this up like right now. So yeah, I know we had a lot to catch up on, but thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I know with all the stuff that's going on, it's really important for us to focus not only on taking care of ourselves and kind of like cultivating our hobbies and our creative spirit, but I think it's also very important for us to tap into our communities and to really reach out and be part of community right now. And I think that's also one reason why I finally found the energy to sit down and like make this video is like, you know, we're not going to get through this by ignoring our communities and by ignoring our social bonds to each other. We can only get through this by holding tight to each other and keeping those bonds and supporting each other. So I think for me it was really important to get this video out. And so thank you so much for sticking around to the end while I ranted endlessly about all the knitting that I've been doing. Like I said, been doing a lot of knitting. And hopefully it won't be as long before my next video, but I've been very excited to share all the stuff that I've been knitting with you all, and thank you for spending the time with me today. If you like what I'm doing here, please take a moment to like this video. Please consider subscribing to my channel. It helps me out so much. And until next time, take care and I'll see you soon. Bye.